What that's about. Maybe it's my phone saying it has no more power. Okay, so this is a really interesting one, yeah. Corrado Cagli and Dante Baldelli. This is a painted ceramic tile from 1931. So there's kind of a populist graphic quality to this piece. And you can see a lot of this happening. There's the repeated figures and forms, overlapping repeated elements, multiple and sequential images, okay? And then one other thing that I forgot to list over here, but I want to mention to you guys, which is called the decisive moment. Or if you take a look at the poses, especially up here, this guy on the right, you see how they're standing? This guy right here, he's waving a flag. You ever try to stand like this for a long time? It's really hard. There's a sense of a gesture that's about to happen, or that's about to take place. The feet up here. You can't actually hold that. You have to move if you're in that position. But there's some poses where, yeah, hold a sledgehammer over your head for a long time. Just try it, right? No, he's about ready to have it come down. All of these people are in this pose of about to move. And it's that instant right before a decisive moment is going to happen. Does that make sense? So we, as an audience, we look at those figures and we know what that feels like to have your foot in the air. You know they're about to take a step. So you get a sense of that time, and you get a sense of that motion in your body. You get kind of a physical sensation just looking at it. This is a really cool piece. This is another scientist photographer. This is Harold Edgerton, who's at MIT. And this was in 1964. I think he's still there, actually. And he set up a camera, in this case, timed to a gun going off to find out what really happened when a bullet would go through different objects. So this is an apple. And the interest here is that the apple's actually exploding out in both directions, even though the bullet's just going one way. That the stuff comes out the back as well as the front. It's kind of an interesting discovery about how this apple's coming apart. I think eventually it just totally shatters, but we're catching it here in the moment while that's happening. And you get here, this is you get sort of some motion lines. You actually get the lines of the pieces of apple coming out of the hole, and a blurring as well right around here. And then even in terms of graphic standards, this is Marjane Satrapi from her novel called Persepolis, The Story of a Childhood. She's an Iranian artist, and she created this entire graphic novel about her experiences as a woman in Iran. And so, but here again, you see this sense of motion. Down here, these guys climbing the stairs, you get a bunch of lines, and look at, they're like 2-3 steps at a time with their feet barely touching. As you get a little bit higher, there's not quite as many motion lines. They're slowing down a little, and here their feet start to touch. Their feet only go up one step. Up here now they're sweating and they're bent over. So as you follow this illustration up, you get a sense of a lot of speed at the bottom, and by the top they've slowed down a lot. So it's a really good example of the difference between that depiction and this one, and how much motion you get from it, or how much sense of motion. On the right, this 2-panel piece where he's saying, well, but when you're run, and you're behind, it makes movements that are, how do you say, obscene? And he's like bouncing his hands like his butt. The gesture, you can see it there because he's got not 2 hands, but in fact 4 going up and down. And then she's like, well, then don't look at my ass. Oh my gosh. I think it's just really funny. I actually haven't seen it. I'd love to. I really would like to see it. Okay, David Hockney, you guys are familiar with him. He's depicted time in a different way. Repeated figures and forms, overlapping repeated elements, and multiple images that are sequential. So here he's got, different moments of all these different people from a single Scrabble game. So rather than getting a sense of one particular instant of the game, you get a sense of this probably took place over, a few minutes, with her thinking, and then figuring it out, and she's going to play, and she's looking and thinking, and here he is. Oh, what are you going to do? Oh, look at that, So because, it's the same person. It's not 4 people's heads right there. It's one person's head. But you look at all the different pieces and kind of reassemble in your head mentally what was happening, what was taking place with all of these different depictions. And then there's something called retinal reaction that really makes something look like it's moving.
I mean, that whatever.
It's moving.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can't look at it.
It doesn't look like it's sitting still, does it? Yeah. That's because what's happening is the places in your eye that your rods can't simultaneously see black and white each particular moment. So they're so close together here, and the rhythm is so even that as you look across it, you get almost a vibration because the edges of your cone or your rods are trying to switch back and forth. See the black, the white, the black, the white, the black, the white, and so it gets this. It's a retinal reaction in your retina. Here's another one by Julian Stanczak. Now, what's truly amazing about these pieces is they were done in 1960s, 60, 65, before we had computers. So this was all done by hand.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's impressive. I was gonna say, I feel like people had more creative thought process than maybe. You just sit and think.
Yeah. No. Well, I'm just talking technically. These are pretty amazing because they're so clean and sharp. Hi. And then here's another example that kind of gets a sense of motion or time or both with repeated figures and forms and multiple and sequential images. This is an algorithmic art. This is like fractals. Do you guys know about fractals? A mathematic equation that repeated over and over again creates these really amazing. I actually saw I found online a whole art show that they'd done a competition of artwork based on fractals. That was.
Move, right?
They don't.
I've seen pieces like this move, just like this one.
I think what happens is the computer will generate it based on the formula, the mathematical formula, and so as it generates it, it changes and moves. But this particular one they were all still images. Like people had created the equations and then let them go until they said, oh, that's it, that's the composition I want, and grabbed them. But yeah, fractals, because they self-generate. You come up with the math and you assign the colors and the shapes and things, and then they're really cool. Okay, so that's it for time and motion.
As much as I hate math, I was able to create some really pretty graph images
using fractals. Okay, and then I'm just going to really quickly just keep right on going to words and sounds, because this one's really short. And you guys are also using words in your pieces. And when we see words depicted visually, we kind of have that, like I was talking about before, with when you see somebody whose body is clearly about to take a step, you get kind of a physical kinesthetic response. We also have an audio response when we see words. You think about how they sound. You know, especially if they're words that kind of have a sound component that's really prevalent. We're going to see some Lichtenstein right now, Jeremy. So, so the points that are important: words as images. So words are, how do they look in terms of their image? How do words and images play together? A typeface is a particular style of letters used in typography or text. Text and copy is, in graphic design, you're talking about a body of words, like a block of text, as distinguished from images in a graphic artifact like a book or a poster. Calligraphy is the art of fine handwriting, and typography is the art of making and using movable type. So these are vocabulary words that you probably should know. Here's a good example of some text words as images and combined with images, both. The Roy Lichtenstein piece called Blam, because the way this text is written is a big part of what gives it its power. It's not just that it says blam, which is in and itself, what is that called? Onomatopoeia? When the word sounds like what it is. But it also is created in this very bright, graphic, all bolds. And notice how, this is really important, text grabs our attention. It becomes a focal point. So that's one of the first places my eye goes. Once I see the text, it's kind of hard to look away. But then the number 3, I recognize that, so that helps me because that's a symbol that I recognize. And then even the little stars on the corners.
Yeah, I jumped to 3 right away. I totally missed the blam because it's red.
Part of it is that right now this is a sort of a softer image because of the light in the room.
Yeah. Okay.
It has a bit more contrast when it's like that red's a little not quite as dark as that usually. On my screen, you might notice it differently. Jean-Michel Basquiat uses text and image together in a different way. He has more text and it's less clean, so it's not quite as, it doesn't grab you quite as much. Like, it's easier to look away from it because it's more like the same style of line work that he uses in the rest of the work. But you have to be really careful with text because it does create a very strong focal point. And if the page isn't balanced where you're using it, or there's not enough of an image balance with it, it's difficult to look away. It creates a very strong focal point.